Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the Commander's Journey, the place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player
and an experienced one.
This journey is for new Magic players interested in Commander. So this week, even though we can feel like we're getting a little down, being locked in our houses and all, we have a little bit of a pick-me-up because it's spoiler week, isn't it?
It's very exciting. So for those of you at home, we're recording this. The spoilers have just started. We're getting to the bulk now of the 2020 Commander spoilers, as well as the Ikoria. And we picked out each a card that we didn't think would quite make it into our top 5, but that would be fun to talk about just to get us rolling on this one.
Just to get started, just because we've been geeking out for like the last few hour.
That's an understatement. There's been a lot of geeking out happening.
Okay. So do you want to start or you want me to start on this? What do you want to do?
I can start. I mean, my pick for this one, I wanted to pick a card that I can see myself adding to this deck and might very well do so after we're finished. That card is Fireflux Squad. It's 3 in a red for a creature human soldier with haste. It says whenever Fireflux Squad attacks, you may exile another attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card on the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I'm going to probably add that to this deck after we're finished here. I just don't know the price of it yet to see if I can or not, but that's what I'm looking at doing.
Yeah, because if you tapped on this video, you know you're still listening to a Purphoros Deck Tech, but we just have to talk about these cards. So it's like when you attack, then you get a dig through your library and sneak attack.
Exactly. So the deck's all about the sneak attacking, and this really helps you do that. It's attached to this creature, so you don't even need to have the commander out. But if you don't, this one will go in, get the swing off. And as long as you are attacking with it in one other thing, that's the requirements it's made, and then you can throw anything else in its place pretty much. So, it's meant for some situations where you're attacking with something small. In this deck, you're probably something you cheated out. You don't really need to hit it as much as something else bigger. So you're swapping one thing for another.
Yeah, there's so many cool cards in these in Ikoria and in the Commander sets. It's all being spoiled over this weekend. It's been really awesome. And I'm going to go down the same route you've been going down, Alex. I mean, talking about a red deck and a red card. I just built mono black deck, and so I'm thinking black, and I'm looking at this card came out. It's an artifact. It's a black artifact. It's Netherborn Altar. It's 1 black for an artifact. You tap it. You put a soul counter on Netherborn Altar. Put your commander into your hand from the command zone. Then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Altar. And I already have an Ayara deck that has life gain and life loss into it. I'm like, I could use that to cheat my commander costs if I keep getting removed. And then in the set, they also released a Nesting Grounds. It's a land that taps for colorless. You and tap it to move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. You activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So there you go. Once you get that soul counter on Netherborn Altar, you use your land, Nesting Grounds, to just remove it and stick it on a token or stick it anywhere else you want. Or you can use a card like Soul Diviner, which is a blue-black. For a creature zombie wizard, you tap it, you remove a counter from an artifact, a creature, a land, or a planeswalker you control, and you draw a card. This would even synergize even better because there you go tapping. You take that soul counter off Netherborn Altar, and you draw a card off it, and you get the commander back in your hand so you can cheat your commander cost. Anyway, there's so many cool synergies and things coming in with this deck, with this new set. So this is just one I think that's definitely going in a few of my decks.
There you go. So we're going to work our way back to Theros Beyond Death. We decided, and I think we may continue to do this, try to give a good commander from the last set one last time to shine before we move off of it. And for this one, I picked something a little bit out there. I haven't seen too many decks with Purphoros helming it. And this is the version of Purphoros, which is Purphoros Bronze-Blooded. It's a legendary enchantment creature god. It's indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Purphoros isn't a creature. It also says other creatures you control have haste. And then the main ability that the deck is synergized around, just 2 in a red. You may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step. It's a 7/6.
And it costs 4 in a red too, right?
4 in a red. Oh, yes. I missed that. My apologies. All good. Too excited. Started rolling through the cards fast.
Get right into it.
Exactly. So this deck, it's very, very synergistic. Everything's either going to take advantage of an ETB, a swing, or the death trigger on it. And you're really looking at getting full value out of that sneak attack. And what's really nice about Purphoros at the helm of the deck, it's pretty much a commander sneak attack. So most of the time it's going to sit there just as an enchantment. That's an indestructible enchantment that's giving all your stuff haste, which is already fantastic. Then also at the same time adds that sneak attack element that you have that your opponents have trouble dealing with. And I haven't seen it removed too often the couple times I've played it, and it's been a very powerful deck.
And there's been a few times I played against you when you were playing Purphoros, and every time you sneak attack, sometimes you just built up your devotion to red and you turn them from an enchantment into a creature, and there you got a 7/6 swinging at you as well. So there's definitely a lot of good aggro cards in this. Cards that really get in your face.
It's one of those ones too, and I tried to build it in such a way when we were doing it that basically it's really scary in a 1v1. Let's throw that out there. But mostly for most commander games, it's a 1v1, v1v1. Sometimes when you come out of the big 8 too hot, you get targeted, or you get you'll end up, on the other players will team up against you, let's say. Mm-hmm. This deck does a pretty good job. It does come out very hard, and you can be targeted because of it. What I liked about it did a pretty good job holding its own, even in a situation where, you're a little overwhelmed. As long as you're not aimed at too hard, in like a complete 3v1, as long as you can kind of convince one other person to stay a little bit farther back, it can hold its own pretty well. And not get completely run over or destroyed.
Yeah, so when you sit down at the table, you just be like, yeah, this is the weaker Purphoros. We're just building this deck. So you don't have to take it so hard on me. It's all good.
I think you're going to end up finding it's the weaker Purphoros, and then all of a sudden you won the next game, and they go, are you sure it's the weaker Purphoros? It might be the stronger one.
Hey, I'm just taking a page out of your book, Alex. Like, you were really good at was it the first few times? I remember we were all getting together with the play group, and you're like, yeah, this is my Geshaft deck. It's my weak deck. This is not my great deck.
No, it's a dinosaur deck. It can only be so powerful. That was always my point. But it did. Oh, it always put in work. It always does.
See, I was taking a page out of your book. This is the weak Purphoros deck.
You don't want to trick someone, but I really did convince myself of the Geshaft deck.
I think you were the only one at the table thinking that
I was the only one. Everyone else is looking at me like, dude, really? And I feel so bad too. I really did convince myself though that it was on lower power level, but it's not. So we'll get right on in it.
Not at all.
So we'll talk about some of the best synergistic cards in the deck. These are cards that are most things in this deck are going to be very strong, powerful creatures. You'll see in the deck there's a lot of high mana costs. It's not such a big deal when Purphoros is helming it. But some of the fun ones, I have a Worm Coil Engine in the deck. Worm Coil Engine, it's one of those ones that everyone kind of goes, oh god, a Worm Coil Engine? Yes, it is, and boy does it work well with the deck. A Worm Coil Engine is a 6 generic mana artifact creature worm with Death Touch and Lifelink, and when Worm Coil Engine dies, create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Lifelink. It's a 6/6, so basically splits in half. But what sometimes happens, I've used both Worm Coil Engine in the deck offensively and defensively to kind of flash it in on someone else's turn. As this version of Purphoros does not, you can do it as a flash, instant speed, surprise someone and get a positive trade with the Death Touch trigger, not minding if it dies, or you can do it for a big swing and then it just splits on you instead, and you just only paid 3 mana for it. So very powerful combo right there.
I can imagine the person having a memory in R&D who created this card when they were a kid in their backyard, and that earthworm comes out and you just You're just tempted to just rip that thing in half because they told you in science class they both would survive, right?
There you go.
Am I going off?
No, it's
Am I
all
going
good.
off topic?
I believe this is an Alexis Jansen special, is who made this card. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. Another fun one I want to point out specifically. This is like this one right here is the Christmas Magical Christmas Land Christmas Came Early card, and it's a fantastic little combo, which is Ilarg the Raise Boar, and you can almost use that as the commander in this deck if you want. It's not meant for that, but you don't have to do much changes if you want this to be the commander instead. Love this card too. It's 3 red and a red for a legendary creature, Boar God. It has trample, and when Ilarg the Raise Boar attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and then return that creature to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And when Ilarg the Raise Boar dies or is put into exile, you may put it third from the top of its owner's library if you want. It's a 6/6. But there's a version of this where you get Purphoros out. Maybe this is like turn 4, you ramped a little bit. You get Purphoros, you sneak in Ilarg with the Purphoros, Ilarg trigger on the stack, get something even bigger, going in, swinging in, and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, they just lost 3/4 of their health.
That's
and
nasty.
Everything goes back to where it was pretty much before. Ilarg goes into your deck just a little bit from the top, and the other one goes back into your hand, and oh boy, is it powerful.
Oh, that's just nasty. You might as well have, any sort of sneak attack you can commander and lieutenant you can have in this deck. So yeah, that'd be nasty. You didn't get both of those out against me though.
No, that's a Magic Crystal Land, but I've done it once. It's one of those, like, I almost don't want to do it because boy, does everyone at the table want to get you out of that game at that moment.
Yes,
they're like,
they do.
You just did what now?
Yes, they do. Another really good card that synergizes great with Purphoros is Flame Shadow Conjuring. So talk to us about this. I'll go ahead and read it. It's 3 and a red. It's an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 red. If you do put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that creature, that token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step.
So this works fantastic with the deck. You don't have to worry so much about the legendary roll. There's not too many things with legendary running around in this deck. There's a few, but not too many. Basically, just for that additional red, you can pretty much double your damage on that swing, because it just matters when it enters the battlefield. You cheat something out with Purphoros. You get another copy of it for another red mana, and then you just go in big with that big swing right there. You get all the triggers that will happen when that goes, and that's one of the ways you just lay on the damage.
And speaking of duplicating, you got Mimic Vat here for 3. It's an artifact with imprint that whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. And for 3 and tap it, you create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So again, you can just make a copy of that thing you brought out to sneak attack with. There's just so many ways to multiply your creatures in this deck and just swing in for a bunch of damage.
What's great about Mimic Vat, too, is, you can save something that's going to go away with Purphoros and then have it on the cheap over and over and over again. And so pretty much you're never paying full price for most of the creatures in this deck. I've done it a few times just because I want something big to stick around just as a blocker. So it's not like you'll never do it, but you have the option to wait for a later game to do that. And then early game, you just rack in the damage and then pull back a little bit as the game starts, slowing down a bit.
All right, and this next one, I know why you have this in the deck. You got to have this in any sneak attack deck, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
It's Sundial of the Infinite. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact, and for 1 and tap in the turn. Activate this ability only during your turn. Now, something like this, when I was a newer player, which I still consider myself, though, it was hard to understand why would this card be so great. But if you are going through all the steps, and you're in the attack step, and something then says, you can bring someone on the battlefield, attack it, and then after you're done with attacks, you have to exile it or get rid of it. An effect like this would just end the turn wherever you're at, and then that end step would never happen, and that card would never go away.
Exactly. This is one of those cards, and I have a few in the deck. We actually quickly go over them too. They're just meant to basically keep that stuff. You snuck it out, and then turns out that's staying there now. You just didn't pay full price for it. And Sundell the Infinite's great. And because it happens at the end of the next end step trigger, you don't have to worry about that. You'll just you skip it right over with the Sundial, so you get to keep it around for a little bit. The other ones too I want to talk about, it's Conjurer's Closet and Endless Sands to do it. Conjurer's Closet is a little different. This one, it's for 5 generic mana for an artifact, and at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature card you control, then return that card to the battlefield under control. So usually this gets used in a blink deck, but what's nice about this, you can stack the triggers in such a way that you use Conjurer's Closet, you blink the creature that you have in play, it's now a new instance of the creature that does not have the sacrifice trigger on it, and that one will stick around. So it's just one of the ways to avoid, again, paying full cost for that creature. And the last one I talked about was Endless Sands, and this one's an odder one. It's a land this time around. It's a desert, actually. You can tap it to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can tap 2 and tap it, exile target creature you control, or 4 and tap it, you sacrifice Endless Sands and return each creature card exiled with Endless Sands to the battlefield under its control. So with this version of it, it's just a land variant that if there's some reason you're worried something's going to get rid of, or you want to just save something in the last moment, you can then bring it back later using the ability. This one is kind of like you build a little bank of creatures to go, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere you can unleash them all in one go. I've done this once where I had a decent bank going, and I unleashed it basically as basically don't attack me, and I'm going to unleash you on you if you're going to go in with a big swing as a big surprise. So you can kind of keep this up as a bit of a defensive measure too. It is one of those things you are a little bit susceptible because if someone takes it out, of course you just exiled all your own stuff. So not the fantastic, but definitely something to have in the deck as an extra option.
With that second effect where you exile a target creature you control, could you do that to your sneak attack creatures, the ones you put on and take off? So before you take it off,
exactly.
At instant speed or 2 and tap it, you can just, instead of return to your hand or exiling it, you can just exile it under Endless Sands.
Exactly. So that way you don't have to have it die and go to the graveyard by sacrificing it. You can just put it under the Endless Sands instead, and that way you might not lose it to the graveyard, for most of the game. This way, at least there's a version of this where you can bring it out later and really surprise someone.
Okay, so those are some cards that are just really good in the deck that just synergize really well. Let's get in the next section. We're going to talk about ramp cards in this deck, and it's a mono-colored deck, and it's mono-red, so it doesn't have a lot of great options, but we have a few cards that help out a lot. I'll go ahead and talk about the first one. We've talked about it in our mono episode 2 weeks ago. It's Caged Sun for 6 generic mana. It's an artifact. As Caged Sun enters the battlefield, you choose a color, obviously red in this case, and then creatures you control the chosen color get +1/+1. Whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana to the chosen color, add 1 additional mana of that color. So it just doubles up all of your mana, which is just excellent.
Probably the best ramp card in the deck. It's not really synergistic as much as it's synergistic in that it's a monocolored deck, and boy do I want a Caged Sun in my monocolored deck. That's probably the ramp card I'm most happy about drawing at. And the other thing about this deck, and the other card I want to talk about, which is a very interesting one, I know I had talked about it a long time ago, and actually our first one we ever did, where I said, this is going to be a sleeper card. It's not going to go into most decks, but there'll be a couple decks that want this. One of the reasons I started building this deck was that I was looking at it and went, I want to find a place to put this card. Where does it make sense? And this deck is perfect for it. And that's Fires of Invention. It's an enchantment. You may cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. And it also says you may cast spells with converted mana costs less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana costs. So all of a sudden, you get to basically play something free per turn on your turns. But because Purphoros' ability is an activate ability, it does not count as part of that. So all your mana can go to just using Purphoros' ability and other abilities you have.
It's just nasty, right? You get, if you have just 10, like say you had just 6 mana out, right? You can drop 2 things that cost 6 mana. That's like having 12 mana out. It's like doubling up again. It's just a different way to double up. And then, like you said, just use abilities because this doesn't affect that.
And again, it doesn't get rid of the instance, sadly, because you can't do it on your turn. But again, a lot of this deck, too, the only time you're really doing things on other people's turns is usually you want to swing big on your turn. Is sometimes you want to use it for defensive purposes. You want to sneak attack out something as a blocker. But you can still do that with Purphoros ability. That's not a drawback for this whatsoever.
Love this card. Love this card. And there's another card here, Golden Guardian.
This one's an interesting one. So this one I was looking at mostly. We do have a budget for these decks. I didn't want to go over 250. After that, we get kind of ridiculous. So this deck is a 250 and under deck. And so I was trying to look at some other ramp cards that weren't super expensive, and this works out perfectly for the deck. Actually, Joel, do you want to read this one?
Sure, yeah. It's Golden Guardian is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature golem. He's got Defender. And then for 2, Golden Guardian fights another target creature you control. When Golden Guardian dies this turn, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. It's a 4/4. So if you did fight another target creature and you died and you transform it, it becomes Gold Forged Garrison, which is a land that taps and you add 2 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Or for 4 and tap, you can create a 4/4 colorless Golem artifact creature token.
So when I had first built the deck, I actually had Ancient Tomb in the deck, which is a fantastic card, and also something if you wanted to add, add a little extra money, that 250 isn't stopping you. You want to add that as an upgrade to the deck. But this one I had in as it turns into a better version of Ancient Den with the upside, and it's actually very easy to trigger the Gold Forge Garrison. Not only is almost every creature in the deck bigger than this, so you can even for 1 mana cheaper sneak it out with Purphoros, spend the 2 mana to have it fight something bigger, and sometimes that can be just Purphoros because he's indestructible. He doesn't mind. He can do that at any point as long as he's a creature, which will happen every now and again. You can just have it fight it, and all of a sudden it turns around and it becomes an Ancient Tomb without the drawback, as well as a token generator. So you can, for just a little bit of mana investment, all of a sudden really have a powerful land on your side of the field.
That sounds familiar. Sacking your own creatures to get card draw.
I have to say this one's a weirder one too. It's the sacking your own creatures for ramp, but again, it's going at a slightly weirder access, but it's a fun addition and definitely something that's not too much to pull off.
And I like that creativity to be able to have things like this in there because it comes out and people look at it there, or when you're playing, they're not understanding how you're utilizing its ability, and then next thing you know, you're turning into a really good land that you can use to make a bunch of 4/4 golems if you needed them. And add 2 mana, you're just doubling up. It's great. It's great.
Exactly. So then we have some fantastic card draw in the deck. Now, red is a little harder on the card draw angle, so I had to get a little more creative. We do have some of the go-tos, such as a skull clamp. You can just attach it to something that's going to die off the trigger anyways. You can just always do that. But one of the cooler ones I like in the deck that really goes well with it, and this is probably the one I'm most happy to see in my hand, is Sandstone Oracle. It's 7 generic mana for an artifact creature Sphinx. Has flying, and when Sandstone Oracle enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that opponent has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. It's a 4/4. Not, some people are going to not see how great this card is, but when all of a sudden you can cheat it out for 3 mana, and then maybe you just needed to refill your hand in red, and someone is doing pretty decently, or at least okay. I mean, if they're going off with their hand, all of a sudden you're going off with your hand with them. But some of the time, too, you just need to fill back up to 7. You'll find someone else that's there, and just boom, right back in it.
That's nice, because Purphoros, when you sneak those creatures out, you still get your ETB effects then, right?
Yes.
That's nice. That's really good. Another card that's really good, it helps we get this card draw, is Ox of, and this one just came out in the last set too, Ox of Agonas. It's 3 red and red for a creature Ox. When Ox of Agonas enters the battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. It has Escape for 2 red, exile 8 other cards from your graveyard. And then you can cast this from your graveyard for its escape cost. Ox of Agonas escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. So you can utilize this thing twice if you needed to. That's really good, especially later game too, right? You might not have a 7-card hand. You might have like a 4 or 5 card hand, and you need some new cards.
And with this deck, stuff is going to the graveyard. You honestly can't get enough in your hand. So when your hand runs dry, you can throw out Ox of Agnes, which is a 4/2, and all of a sudden, he quickly goes out. He gets tossed right in the bin. You get to draw those 3 cards, and then sure enough, later in the game, you can draw it again as long as you're, you got a decent graveyard going. But again, with this deck, that's not hard to do.
Awesome. We got a few more card draw spells.
Yes, so we'll go a little quicker on this one. These are just good creatures with card draw. One is Dragon Mage. It's 5 red and a red for a creature Dragon Wizard. That's flying, and whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So this will work for everyone. It's a full windmill for everyone. But in theory, you're going to get the most value out of it as you're the one choosing when it happens. And you can sneak this one out. It's not too hard to hit a player that's open just because all of a sudden it'll come out for 3 mana and really start dealing some damage. And then the other one that's exciting is Null Spine Dragon. Null Spine Dragon is 5 red for a creature dragon. It also has flying. And when it comes into play, you may discard your hand and draw cards equal to the damage dealt to target opponent this turn. Now, for this one, sometimes you'll play it straight at the end of the turn with something like the Fires of Invention if you want it out and to stay out after you've dealt a heavy amount of damage for the turn. I've also done this one a few times, just using Purphoros' ability to do it on other people's turns. Someone took a big hit of damage, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'll take some card draw for that. Because it doesn't matter if you dealt the damage, as long as a target opponent dealt that much damage.
Nice. Very nice. So you could do that at instant speed then.
Yes, with Purphoros' ability.
And you're just like, oh, I'm just going to drop this out, and then, I'll take that card draw too.
Yes, exactly.
I love it.
It just becomes a 3 mana card draw for as much damage as
let's just take it. Okay, so that's some good card draw. Now let's get into some removal and some wipes. So some single target removal we got. Here's a card that's also printed, reprinted. I don't know if it was printed or reprinted. You'll tell me.
Printed for the first time, yeah.
For the first time. It is, in just this last year's Dracusath, Maw of Flames. It's 4 red for a legendary creature dragon. It's got flying. Whenever Dracusath Maw of Flames attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each up to 2 targets, and it's a 7/7. So you can just swing in and then just add that damage up just to remove a creature that's in your way, and that's the way Red likes to utilize single target removal, is just doing direct damage to your targets.
Exactly, and it just goes bing, 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 and just starts to destroy a couple creatures on the battlefield. And again, it's any target, so you can destroy all 3 of your opponents. Each take out 1 thing. It's not going to hit the things with a lot of toughness on it, but since it's an extra ability off of an attack, often you can sit there pretty scary with this one. Then another one, which is a little more targeted removal, is Duplicant. It's 6 generic mana for an artifact creature shapeshifter. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature with imprint. And then as long as a card exiled with Duplicant is a creature card, Duplicant has the power and toughness and creature types of the last creature card exiled with Duplicant. It's a shapeshifter and a 2/4. So what's nice about Duplicant is I've used Duplicant just as a removal spell. There's not really a lot of ways you can get exile in the deck like this, especially attached to a creature in mono red. But Duplicant will do that for you. You can exile it, and even if it doesn't matter so much that it becomes a copy of it, it's great when it does, and it can really mean the difference in a game. But if you're not looking for that, all of a sudden you just need a removal spell. You can use this as a 3 mana removal spell that exiles any target non-token creature.
I never even thought of using it in that way, because in the decks I have, I wanted to just copy some cards I had and make more tokens. So yeah, but that's really good. That's a really good way to do it. And you can cheat it out to do it too, right?
Exactly. On instant speed, other people's turns. And again, it's hard to deal with Purphoros. Once it's out there, it is indestructible, and it is an enchantment. So it will sit there and often be difficult to deal with.
There you go. And then another really good single target removal. It's a common one, but it's still a good card, especially in this deck, is Meteor Golem for 7 generic mana. It's an artifact creature golem. When Meteor Golem enters the battlefield, destroy target an on-land permanent and opponent controls. It's a 3/3. So this is definitely in there because you can also sneak it, and you don't always got to pay the 7.
Yeah, exactly. you definitely don't want to be paying the 7 for this. You want to be paying the 3. But this is how, in this mono red deck, you're going to be able to deal with enchantments that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do with. So it's 3 mono, destroy targeting damage. All of a sudden, you're acting like you're a white deck with this.
All right, let's talk about some board wipes now, too. A few ways to get rid of some things.
So a lot of them are based on big creature and swing. So there's some other ones, but the most synergistic ones in the deck are going to be attached to creatures. One of those is Balefire Dragon. It's 5 red for a creature dragon, has flying. Whenever Balefire Dragon deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. It's a 6/6. So chances are it's just going to do a nice, clean 6 damage. Once you kind of sneak it in, it's going to go in the air, surprise them because you didn't probably pay the full mana cost for it, and then just deal 6 to everything they control. So all of a sudden, because they can't block it, they're going to get their whole board wiped, because most things have 6 or less toughness. So you'll be able to use that to take them out. And another one, which is a similar effect as well, and this one doesn't even need to attack, is Ryusei, the Falling Star. It's 5 and a red for legendary creature, Dragon Spirit, and has flying. And when Ryusei, the Falling Star, dies, it deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. It's a 5/5, so sneak this one in for Purphoros. Purphoros is indestructible, so even if it isn't creature, it's going to stick around. And then when Ryusei goes away, all of a sudden, all creatures in play that don't have flying and 5 toughness or less are just going to get taken right out.
That's really good, and especially when you're monocolors and you're in a color like red that doesn't have access to a ton of wipes, these are the ways you get around that. Make sure you include them. Like in our episode, we talk about deck building. We talk about the importance of having enough single target removal and enough board wipes to keep yourself going in a game. So that's what we want to do. And the last section we talk about also in deck building, which is also important, is some recursion and some protection. So what cards do we put in this deck for that, Alex?
So red is a little bit harder on the recursion side of things. You don't have an Eternal Witness or anything like that to use. One of the cooler ones, and that really works well with the deck, is Felden of the Third Path. It's 1 red and a red, so it helps you get that devotion as well. For a legendary creature, Human Artificer, 2 red and tap. Create a token that's a copy of target creature token in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste and sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So all of a sudden, everything that you've got now destroyed by sacrificing it to Purphoros, all of a sudden with Felden out, you can just make copies of it over and over and over again. And you'll get, if Purphoros is out and you have Felden out, you'll get the haste off of Purphoros. So all of a sudden you can just take it out, tap it, and then surprise them with something else from your graveyard. Which, all of a sudden everything in your graveyard just becomes recurable over and over and over again.
Nice. Another really good one is this artifact, Nim Death Mantle, for 2 generic mana. It's an artifact equipment. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. Whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4 generic. And if you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Death Mantle to it. It's equipped for 4. So as it dies, right?
Exactly. As that, sacrifice trigger goes on the sack even,
Exactly. That's
come
really
and pay
good.
4 and get it permanently, yep. And it does have that Intimidate on there, as well as it does become a black creature as well, which is the only downside. So now it can be blocked by both black and red creatures, but you get all the other upside to it, where you just won't go away, which is, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you as well too, we talk about protection. You can use Endless Sands as protection as well, and Sundial the Infinite if that would solve your problem. So you can use those, but another one you can do, which is a fun one, this is more recursion, but is Underworld Breach, which is a newer one as well. Underworld Breach is an enchantment that says, for 1 red, each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So for 1 turn, you can just start bringing all your creatures back as you can get away with, and they come in permanently. So again, you cheat stuff out, and then as long as you have the mana to pay for it, which again, something like Fire's Invention, you can play something and then also do this. You can start bringing stuff in and really get something big in play.
Nice, nice. And especially if you get your Nyx Lotus out and you got a bunch of devotion, you're tapping a rock for like 8, you can use all that mana and exile a bunch of stuff.
And there's so much red pips in this deck too, because it's mono red, the devotion matters. You can really make that Nyx Lotus tap for quite a lot. Then all of a sudden, you can bring out 3 or 4 things with Underworld Breach as long as you got the cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, I swear to you, in my mono black deck, every time I'm about to get Nyx Lotus out, I'm tapping it for anywhere from 4 to 8 easily every time. Every time. So there we go. We got Purphoros. So our big win cons were just sneak all these things out, swing in big, and just get all that damage in and knock somebody off. And your alt win con, you got some cards in here that just help you burn out your opponent.
Exactly.
Right?
I have the normal Purphoros in there, the original one that just cares about ETB triggers and are going to burn. I have some enchantments that'll burn some people out over time too. So they can't, sit on it for too long, and that's a good way that you can kind of bring them into range where just a couple big creature swings kind of take them out of nowhere and surprise them for the win. So you got a couple different ways you can win, especially if the game stalls out a little bit.
There you go. Well, this is Purphoros, so of course you can upgrade it. We keep it like at the 250. We want to stay in that range, 250 to 300, not get too crazy with our deck techs. But like you were saying earlier, you can upgrade it by adding an Ancient Tomb, adding a Vidalcanori, some Flash, some ways to just make the deck a little bit stronger if you needed to.
Exactly. There were some power level considerations that you could add in and make it a little more cohesive and a little more powerful. That just based on the budget of me trying to stay underneath 250, I did not want to go into. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the deck does have a few weaknesses. The main one is the fact that because you come in hitting so hard and so fast, and people, especially who've been playing for a little while, it's a little easier with this deck to be ganged up upon. Someone might, they get a little, people get a little scared when all of a sudden you come out and you're like, oh yeah, I deal 20 or 30 to your face out of nowhere in one turn. You had nothing in play, and then all of a sudden, they lost 30 life. You might get aimed at a little bit. So that's one of the weaknesses of the deck. You can be targeted a little more. And of course, if all 3 players gang up against you, it's harder to come back from that. And the other big weakness is as well is that if they do have ways to deal exile enchantments such as Purphoros, the deck does want Purphoros to be out in play. He is hard to deal with. I actually haven't run into too many games. I only ran into one game once where he even got removed once. But especially if you have a lot of exile running around or a lot of enchantment exile, he can get removed, and then you have a lot of high mana costs that is a little harder to deal with.
There you go. Well, that's going to do it for this week, this week's episode. Hope everybody enjoyed that. Everybody goes out and builds himself a Purphoros or some mono-colored deck.
It's a fun deck. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
If you ever it's like a deck that you just want to blow off some steam. You're like, I just need just a game that's just dumb power, and this is that deck right there.
That was very in flavor right there, Alex. Blow off some steam. Let's just burn some people and steam them. Anyway, that's great. So, and we hope everybody's enjoying these deck techs, enjoying the shows. In these next few weeks, we're going to definitely be getting into the sport, talking about the new set, the new Commander set, and we want to put our word out there too to see what cards we're really excited about. And we hope everybody's having a good time looking at the new cards during this really strange time in life.
Oh, it's without a doubt a strange time. Yeah, don't get too down the dumps. You got Magic around the corner, and I think there'll be a brighter side of the rainbow at the end of this. So, just keep safe, keep trucking on, and we'll go from there.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Give us a thumbs up, follow us, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you.